Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming out to the second forum for the School Building Advisory Committee. I'm Larry Kane. I'm the vice chair, sitting in for Charlie Peters, who's traveling for work. And just give a shout out to Charlie. He's done an incredible job as the chair, running this big group for both phase one and phase two. So we miss him. And if you don't know, Diane Netto is superintendent of schools.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight.
So the goal tonight is to go through where we are in the process. If you were here for the last forum, you know, at that point, we were working on 7 different options. And through a number of different processes, we've narrowed that down to 2, which also in the future will give us, as we move forward, will give us the ability to do a much deeper dive on details and costs and design. And so the committee is very much looking forward to that, just getting more detail and more data that we can use to make that final decision where we narrow it down to one option. At that point, this community committee will make a recommendation to the school board and to the town council, and it'll be up to them to accept it exactly as it is. They make changes, amendments, possibly take more feedback. And so that's where we're headed in that. The narrowing down to one option should happen in early June.
Yeah, in the month of June.
Okay, and then I did want to just take a quick aside and say this has been a really exceptional experience as far as being on this committee and watching it operate. It started with, in phase 1, there was 50 plus community participants. And in phase 2, it's a little over 20. But we've also had great participation by the Board of Education and Diane and the town council. Both Board of Education and Town Council have 2 liaisons to the committee that have been there virtually every single week with us. And Tom Hall, also the town manager, has been at the vast majority of the meetings as well. And we've also had great input from school staff as well along with the process. We've a little bit more in phase 1, but we have been out at these existing schools. We've done inventories, met with the principals. Inventories, I mean, like, you know, what are their needs and all. Really got to experience the current conditions and the challenges of the current schools, which absolutely informed us about what needed to be done. And we also, so we did all that through phase 1. Out of that process came 4 options for how to solve the problem. As we got into phase 2, we narrowed down the scope. And at that point, we hired Harriman Associates to be the professional consultants to this process. And that has been invaluable. After all, we are a citizen committee with lots of different skill sets, but it turned out nobody had the experience to cost out $100 million plus project. So their work has been incredible. For the most part, we meet weekly. And so each week we kind of give them more info that we're looking for. We ask for more info. They haven't missed a single deadline we've given them. When you see the slides for kind of where we are in the process, that the Harriman Group has really kept us on target with that and kept us moving forward.
Yeah, so this evening, what we're excited to share with you is where we are in the process. We have 2 options. Some of you may have already taken the survey that opened yesterday. Again, I think one of the hallmarks of all of this work is it is really driven by the needs of the community and the input from the community. And so, you know, this evening, We're hoping to give you a brief overview. We want to share some things with you, but of most importance for us this evening is to engage you, to have you take the information in, ask us questions, get more information so that you feel like you can walk away a little bit more informed this evening. If you look around the room, you'll see that we have some visuals up for you on this side of the room. Over here, you'll see the layouts for the proposals for the neighborhood school option. In the back of the room, you'll see layouts for the small addition at Wentworth. And one of the layouts for the middle school, that is a two-story addition. There is also another option that's being considered for a one-story addition. It basically looks the same. It just, instead of having two stories, would have one story. And then on this side of the room, there's a visual mock-up of what the consolidated K-2 school would look like. So certainly, please be making sure that before you leave this evening that you take a look at those. Those will also be in our slide deck. Up here in the front, we have copies of paper surveys. So if you would prefer to take the survey on paper, we have those for you to grab this evening. Or if you have a friend that might prefer a paper survey, please, by all means, take those copies this evening. And then we have a box and some index cards. If there's some feedback that you want to leave for us, that, some people are more comfortable sharing publicly than others. And so if you're one of those folks who is less comfortable, we have some index cards because your feedback is really critical in this process. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and dig in and get started.
And since he came back, Ray Grogan is the assistant superintendent, so didn't want to just leave him hanging. So this is obviously just where we've gone through the process. Those green boxes indicate where we've done the forums, but also basically line up with when the surveys have hit as well. And I really do want to encourage people, tell everybody to fill out that survey. It really does help and inform us. And one of the very concrete examples of that is one of these two options that we've narrowed down to was actually a suggestion that came in from the community in the first survey. And we listened to that and with the help with Harriman, we costed that out, and it had some great advantages that we hadn't considered before. It was kind of a mix of a couple of options previously, but we really do take the feedback seriously. So, and then throughout the presentation, we have a few of these did you know slides that are a little bit just educational for just how serious the need is. I think Diane could spend some time talking about the history of trying to solve the overcrowding and modernization challenges, but it's been
the district has really been looking at solving for this problem since 2014, actually. So this is, although for some folks it may feel like a new conversation, this is something that the district has been at work at for more than 10 years at this point.
So that previous one was just showing that, and I heard this as soon as I joined the committee, that the existing middle school was already undersized basically the day it opened. And so I'm sure most of you realize that the entire sixth grade is in modular portable classrooms. And that is one of the major things we're trying to solve for in this undertaking. And that the sixth grade, the 6th to 8th grade will, like the other enrollment figures, are still going to grow by up to 200 students in I think it would hit the middle school. The middle school in about 8 to 10 years, right?
Yeah, in about 2034. But again, I think the concern for the middle school, and you'll see this in the slide deck, is really around the concern around having a standalone building for our sixth graders who have to walk in and out of the sixth grade portable to get to the main building multiple times a day for all of their allied arts classes, for any special services that they might need. To go to lunch, to have gym class. And so, that is something that in this day and age, is a concern. Not just because of that. I was formerly the middle school principal here in Scarborough, and I can tell you, even in a terrible thunderstorm, it is not a great thing. We have had to call a hold in place at the middle school in previous times if there was a major thunderstorm and lightning, because obviously, we don't want our kids walking in those circumstances. This slide, I don't think we're going to go over all of these things, but you can see that we are really trying to solve for multiple things as part of this K-8 project. These are pieces that if you joined us for the first forum, you heard us talk about then. So I just finished telling you about the security at the concerns with sixth grade walking. We also don't have secure vestibules at all of our schools. And so, for those of you who aren't familiar with that, most modern schools have kind of like a double set of doors so that when somebody walks into the school, they don't gain entry into the entire facility. And two of our primary schools do not currently have that. And so when people walk in, they're literally in a main hallway of the building. And so that does compromise security. At our smaller schools currently, we do not have separate bus and parent drop-off areas. We do have a large number of parents who self-select to transport their own, and so that can be problematic. We also don't necessarily have all of the modern day security in terms of for example, fire doors. So if you were to visit Wentworth School or our middle school or the high school, when the fire alarm goes off, double doors are automated and close. And that is to prevent a spread of fire in an emergency. And our smaller schools were built at a different era in 1960 when those things weren't on the radar, and so they don't have that ability. We have, if I'm going down to the blue section now, we have a shared cafeteria and gym in all of our primary schools. Again, when those schools were built, they were built at a very different time with different programming and a smaller number of students that attended those schools. And as it stands now, the academic programming for the school is driven by the breakfast and lunch schedule because we have custodians who have to break down the tables and put up barriers so that the students are safe during PE and aren't running into tables and getting hurt or injured. Our smaller schools also lack dedicated art and music spaces. That may not sound like a major thing, but when you're talking about primary level students who are hands-on and wanting to experience things, it's really difficult if you had art class on Tuesday and the teacher was working on a painting project, and on Wednesday that now becomes a music class, and the music teacher is taking out xylophones for the students to play with or something like that. Our clinic spaces are very undersized, they don't allow for privacy for the nurse to have a confidential conversation if she has to call home to a parent and there's a sick child in front of her or someone waiting. There is not space for a child to lie down if they're not feeling well. We have some portable cots that we kind of lay out when that needs to happen. Our classrooms at the primary schools, again, because they were built at a different time, are undersized according to today's standards. And so that's another piece. Again, because these schools were built in a different time, there were different services or less services for students in 1960. Special education has really changed significantly. And the types of intervention services that we must provide for all students, even students who are not in special education, to ensure that they're making the progress that they need. That sometimes requires some pullout, or some time for a staff member to work with small groups of students. And that's very difficult to do in the regular classroom. And we don't have significant spaces like that in our current schools. If we go down to the last column there, we also have outdated and inefficient heating systems in our current primary schools. In fact, the buildings there have an R3 value of insulation. I don't know if anyone here has built a house recently, but houses today or facilities today are built with R28. So we are spending probably a significant amount more to heat our buildings because they do lack that insulation. We have some deficiencies in modern day code. Again, if we open up the building, those are things that would be addressed. We also have maintenance, ongoing maintenance that we have to do to try to ensure that our buildings are able to deliver what we need. And many of things in our buildings are really at the end of their useful life because again, they're 60 plus years old. I am nearing that, and sometimes I feel like I need some upgrades. So I can certainly understand that from a building perspective. And then obviously not enough storage because of a lot of the overcrowding. When we use every space that we have in a facility, when we turn a closet into a workspace for someone, that means that we don't have a place to leave storage.
I think an example I heard from a couple of the teachers were that as they change from one part of the curriculum to the other, they're actually taking their teaching materials home and bringing a new batch in so that they can do that for the the current subject matter.
Yeah.
But so as you can see, we're trying to solve a lot of complex problems with this. The process, I think, has done a great job of being attentive to these things and making sure that we keep coming back to them, that the priorities we're putting forward are truly solving the challenges.
This is just a visual of what our cafetoriums or our cafeteria / gym areas look like during the day. So this is ready for gym class because that is what we have to do. That's the space that we have. So that breakdown time really does impact the useful time that we can utilize those spaces.
And that's even tougher. If you can picture the school day, there's a before school program in that space, and they break down for that and have morning gym classes. Then they break down from that, set up for lunch, break down from that, have afternoon gym classes, break down from that and have an after school program. And that's how many times a day that staff is having to swap that furniture and facility over.
Yeah, this is another visual that basically shares with you in a different format what I just went over with you in that green, red and blue visual. So another way to read that, and certainly all of this slide deck and all of the slide decks from our building committee are available on our website if you go to our building project webpage. So certainly something for you to take in. This slide has an important fact. Again, we have been really keeping track of what live births look like in Scarborough. That is the basis by which we formulate enrollment projections. And so at this point in time, we are expecting an increase of about 200 students at our primary level within the next 5 years. So we're really, expecting a surge that to begin around 2028. And so that's why this is a really important and timely conversation. And that is based on actual live births, not projections of students who haven't been born yet. In the years 2022 and 2023 here in Scarborough, there was an increase of 25% of live births based on what the typical average had been. And so those are students who we're expecting to come to our schools. Scarborough is a very desirable community for people to live in, and we have a lot of families who are choosing to move here to raise their children. And so, these are facts that we're tracking. And so we're continuing to track enrollment births. Births for 2024 did go down. But again, we're looking at those in real time, year over year, to help us know what to anticipate. And so, from a logical standpoint, we're going to see that increase begin at our K-2 schools. We're expecting that to be, then those students will move to Wentworth. So Wentworth will start to grow in about 7 years, and then the middle school in about 10 years or so. So again, we're trying to be forward thinking. We know we are on the precipice of needing to solve for our primary school, but we also don't want to be short-sighted and wait until those students arrive at Wentworth and say, oh gosh, what are we going to do about those students? This is just a visual of one of our clinics in our primary schools. So you can see that there's not a whole lot of room. If a child isn't well, this is the entire office. So, the nurse has a phone and a small desk, and you have an area for a child. We have a lot of students who might require ongoing medications on a daily basis, and so they're dropping in. It's probably not the picture that you would think about when you think about somebody going to a nurse and having consults.
The State Department of Education also outlines some are required, but some are recommended actual square footage for some of these types of facilities, like the nurses' clinics and things, and we're vastly undersized by their standards.
So the next slide is a really deep one. And I think we're going to probably go into it a lot more through the subsequent slides. This is actually a visual of the flyers, the handouts that we have here for you this evening. So if you take a look at this, we put this together to really give a high level overview of what are the two proposals being considered, and what is the scope of work that's being considered. And then if you open up this flyer, you'll see that it also includes some visuals of the layouts that we have around the room as maps. So that, again, that's a piece of information that you can take in and absorb to help you in your understanding.
We're going to go through a lot of this in more detail for the individual school, but there's some, this is a side-by-side comparison of the two options. And on the far left, far right, that's giving you where we are currently for the rough order of magnitude cost, the higher level estimate. Like I mentioned earlier, now that we're down to two options, there's a much deeper dive into the costs to see where we can try to find savings from this point forward. There's also in those columns an estimate on operating costs. This particular one's about staffing, and the advantage or disadvantage or cost changes. I shouldn't say it's an advantage, but the cost differences between the two options, because it's not only the capital cost of putting the buildings up or renovating the buildings, but it's also the ongoing annual operating costs. Staffing is a huge piece of that. And then there is also just a notation on the schools that will be renovated. The intention is to have those schools operate as they're renovated. So we're just making a note between the schools that are newly built nobody will be at that site being taught. So it's a consideration we have in our minds kind of about the educational impact of the construction projects.
This slide speaks to the middle school. One of the other major issues at the middle school currently is, as Larry said, when the school was built, it was undersized from the time that it was built. And so one of the current issues happening at the middle school is the cafeteria is undersized and that cannot serve the needs of students. So currently, the middle school has just over 600 students, and those students have 5 lunch periods because there's not significant cafeteria space. Most schools in Maine would have 3 or 4 lunches at a maximum. We have 5. You also see in this first picture with the smiley faces so that we're not showing actual students. Some of our students eat in the hallway. So we call that our lunch lounge so that it sounds great for students. And it actually does serve some students well because it is quieter. There are not as many students, but it is down the hallway from the cafeteria. And that is required because there is not enough space in our cafeteria. Next year, the middle school is expected to go to 6 lunch periods because of increasing enrollment. Every year, our enrollment shifts, right? And so our current 5th grade class is bigger than our outgoing 8th grade class. And so the middle school enrollment will shift for next year. And that is going to require lunches next year to start at 10:30 in the morning and to go until 1:30 in the afternoon. School ends at 2:25. So the principal has already made plans to have a snack break built in for those students who either have the earliest lunch to have a snack break in the afternoon to sustain them throughout the day, or a snack break in the morning for those students who are going to have the latest lunches. Some of our students also have split instruction time to accommodate those 5 or 6 lunches. And so what that means is I might have a math class. My teacher teaches 20 minutes of math class. Then I go to lunch and then I come back and I get the other 25 minutes of math class. From an academic standpoint, that is not the most desirable because as you know, all of us have been students before, right? Attention wise, it's hard to kind of make some of those shifts. And so we're not maximizing academic instruction in some cases because, again, we're trying to make sure that that we can allow time for all of our students to eat.
Particularly for math.
Yeah, good example, right? All right, I think we're going to dig into our options. So the first option we're going to look at, Larry, is the 3 neighborhood K-2 schools.
Right, and I do want to point out this potentially get confusing, even though we're down to 2 options. But the 2 options of the K-2 neighborhood schools or the unified consolidated school, in all the variations of that, the options for Wentworth expansion and the middle school expansion are the same across those options. So that doesn't impact what's happening in the primary schools from as far as trying to figure out all the different variables. So this option, the 3 neighborhood schools, is which is what we currently have. Through a few different variations on that, we came to that we would replace the existing 8 Corner school with a new K-2 school. So that's a brand new school, and we'd renovate Pleasant Hill and Blue Point. And one of the changes that's subtle here is that under the to the far left of the page where it says new K2, under that, you'll see that projects to have 380 students. And Pleasant Hill and Blue Point would have roughly the same 224, 232. If you look right above each of those, you can see where they currently are. So they're growing with the expansion that we're doing on those schools. But by having the new school be larger, it takes the pressure off those sites. All 3 sites were fairly limited in the size of the sites themselves and how much space we could expand within those sites, taking into account wetlands and all kinds of variables on it. So that new school is bigger than the traditional Scarborough primary schools, but it really allows us to retain that neighborhood, particularly primary school setup where it's 3 area schools rather than one consolidated one. And really what we're going to go through with this is figuring out what of those 2 options, which meets the most criteria, solves for the most issues, and what the community is looking for us to do with it, for which way to go with that. I'll also mention that because it's come up in some questions, by closing 8 Corners, that is a town-owned property. The school district runs the school, but the town owns the property and the building. And so that has some future potential to serve as some other use in the town. So that's something that will happen in the future. We won't be involved at all in making those decisions, but or those suggestions. But it is something that one of the benefits of doing the new school is that we still retain that site for some future community use. And so it's hard to read all of these, but there's also this. So this is very similar to what you saw before. The gold or yellow covered chart is listing some benefits of this school option, but also the trade-offs that would go with that. Well, not necessarily with the benefits, but so both benefits that are you'd get and things to consider that because we're going to renovate and expand on the existing 2 school properties. For instance, that would limit outdoor play space more than it currently is, as an example. So there's, we certainly have heard that the community want to consider that keeping these primary schools, but to expand it to handle the enrollment, there are space constraints. So that you could go through, and those are also in this as well. They list those. And same thing, we've given the magnitude of cost up there, the staffing and the impact of construction. So that is for the 3 neighborhood schools. And this next slide, we could, like a volunteer to read all those. This goes back to what we had before. It's all the benchmarking, and you can see the green checks mean we've satisfied those goals, and the red X's or the TBD. Most of the TBDs they're site dependent. It depends. That would be for the new school. It depends on the specific site that we choose whether or not, for instance, we could expand the play space, and also that just means it's undecided. For this slide here, most of those red X's are around limited play space, and some of the classrooms aren't exactly to the student to square footage ratios, but we're viewing it as acceptable. It just doesn't meet that particular benchmarking. So
I was just going to give you a break for a minute if
Okay.
you wanted. So this is a floor plan diagram of what the new K2 neighborhood school would look like. Again, as Larry said, a little bit bigger than the other two because we have to solve for increasing enrollment. Given the tightness of the footprints at our existing schools, it made sense that if we were going to build a new K-2 school, that one might alleviate some of that by being a little bit larger than the other two. So this is just a sample floor plan of what it would look like. Again, 380 student school, it would have 2 floors. You can see the second floor on the right-hand side of the slide. That would fit right over the top of what you see in the center on the first floor. And again, the way in which we came to what all of these needs were, we're really looking at what are the needs of programming. And so I personally have spent a lot of time with our architects working through this.
This, sorry, the new one is a little bit, that drawing is a little more conceptual than the other two because again, depends on how it would lay out on the particular site that's chosen. Where for Pleasant Hill and Blue Point, we know the site and we know exactly kind of what can fit there. This for Pleasant Hill, this is what Diane referred to earlier is besides the addition, you can see at the kind of to the right-hand side, the two distinctly separate bus loops from the parent pickups. And to the left side going up the diagonal is some increased parking space, which is needed. And then at the top of the drawing is the outdoor play space. This probably come up before. We get a lot of questions about to save space, couldn't we just put a second floor on the existing schools? And the current structure doesn't support that. And so to accomplish that, it would be almost like you would build an entire floor or a school overlaying the top, but supported around the perimeter. It wouldn't even be connected to the building. So that was impractical, partly from a cost standpoint as well. In this, the Pleasant Hill, so it's a extension out the back of the current school as oriented from the main entrance. You can see of the red outline program or drawing of the addition, those on the kind of beige color to the bottom left. That's an example. That's the new cafeteria, and the green diagonal piece in the original school is the gym, and that's gives an example of the separation now between the cafeteria and the gym. And there's Blue Point. Blue Point does have an advantage that even with the extensions or renovations and extensions we're doing with that, over to the left-hand side, there is still room on that lot for future expansion. Now, we just noted that as it was one of the things we asked of Harriman as they were considering these layouts, is to give us some visual on, what could it be if we continue to grow and we're putting a lot of money into these schools, and would we have the ability to expand further? And Blue Point does have that ability. That little, the little addition that's over to the right-hand side, that is the cafeteria and a couple of storage rooms and things. But so it just worked out layout to put that on that side of the existing building rather than as part of the addition out the back.
This is just a look again at the classrooms, what the one-story addition would look like. You can see those classrooms look bigger than the existing classrooms. Those are kindergarten classrooms, and the state specs on kindergarten classrooms is that they should be 1,000 square feet versus 800 square feet because of the different type of programming that kindergarten requires. And so you can see that those match that. And as Larry said, you can see in the bottom right hand the cafeteria that would be erected so that the current cafeteria / gym could just be for gym class. This kind of just shows you another view of some minor renovations that would take place in other parts of the school.
So this is the second main option, which is the consolidated community school. I do want to point out that it was a consolidated school that failed in the last referendum. And this is not that same school. It's K-2 and instead of K-3, it is not in the Downs. And it is significantly has come in less expensive. If you remember, overall, the cost was roughly 160 million. And we've been able to design this consolidated option. Right now, it stands at 132 million.
Well, that's for the whole
Yeah.
project. That's
Right,
not for the
sorry, yes,
school,
yes,
right?
that's a
So,
good point.
so this K-2 school comes in at $88 million.
Right. Actually, that's a great point. All of these slides for each one over to the right have it broken down the total 132 million by each school, so it'll give you the school cost, the what's being renovated at Wentworth, and there's a couple of different options for what we're renovating at the middle school. But it's a great point. We've heard people say that, 132 million for a primary schools seems expensive, and it's not. That's the entire project.
Yeah, so
Let's see.
again, here, like you saw in the neighborhood school option, this kind of just gives an overview of the benefits and trade-offs with this particular option. As Larry had explained in the first option, in this option, all three primary schools would be closed and back in the town's hands to decide on future use. And so we would build a new K-2 school for just under 850 kids. Again, as compared to the previous referendum where a K-3 school was being considered, that school was going to be for, I believe, 1,150 students. And we did get a lot of feedback from the community that just seemed really large for students. And so this is a different look at that. With the same small addition being considered for Wentworth and this, same options being considered for the middle school as the neighborhood option. One of the things that you will notice here, if you were looking at staffing costs for the neighborhood school option, the staffing costs are estimated at $15 million a year annually for the neighborhood option. This option, because you have all staff under one roof, there is less duplication of positions. And so, right, you'd have one principal, not three principals. You'd have, many positions that right now, we have to have dedicated folks at each of the sites. There's savings when you have everyone under one site. So in the consolidated option, staffing costs decreased to $12.4 million. And so that is an annual savings of $2.6 million in our regular budget. So not in what's bonded for the project. I think you explained that, really well a few minutes ago, Larry, that, the cost of the project and the buildings is one aspect of this, but we also wanted to make sure that we were being transparent with the community about what are some other costs that are involved as we make considerations, and one of those is most certainly in staffing.
We can go really quickly through this because it's a brand new school. We can build and design to the benchmarking criteria and make sure we meet all those. So the one red X up there is for the middle school, not with a impact on play area, but the newly built school, we can build exactly what we need. Again, this would be site specific. It's an example of how it would all work. this courtyard style building is popular because not really improves natural light into the classrooms. So, but again, we'd have to fine tune that as we go.
And we also want to spend some time talking with you about what is being considered for Wentworth and middle school. Again, because we are really trying to only come to the community one time and say, let's see if we can solve the problems for the future in one project versus coming back to you in 3 years for Wentworth, coming back to you in 7 years for the middle school. And so we're happy to share with you what the committee's thoughts currently are in regards to those two.
So this is the addition to Wentworth, which was originally designed to be added on. The cafeteria and gym were oversized somewhat to handle future expansion. So that helps a lot of the other schools. There was opportunities to add classroom space, but not necessarily the cafeteria, the gym, all the multi-use spaces. So that little extension has 3 classrooms in it. And the existing, you can see it in that red box down the bottom. The existing HVAC system can also handle that size of an expansion, which is a bonus cost wise, that we don't have to upgrade any of the mechanicals to handle this.
Yeah, and the other thing that, again, to keep costs down for the size of this addition, we also took a look at what a class size looks like. Currently, the board recommendation for class sizes at this level is 18 to 22 students per classroom. And with this addition, it's predicated on class size of 24 per classroom. But again, we felt like that was a compromise that needed to be made to be, financially focused and responsive to staying within certain costs.
So the middle school is next up, and that has a few different options to that based on what we would solve for. So this first one is a 2-story addition, which moves, we would eliminate those portables that are in the lighter beige, the existing, and in effect move the 6th grade into the middle school. And so that is one, it's called option 1 there, you'll see in the quotes. Sometimes I think we need to do a better job renaming these
Naming things, yeah, we've had a lot of
Because after this, you'll get the
naming
1.2.
conventions. Yeah, the nice piece about this, we certainly have heard feedback from parents in the past that although they're not crazy about the idea of their students being in portables, they do like the fact that 6th graders are separate than 7th and 8th graders because, from a developmental standpoint, there are a lot of changes that happen between 6th and 8th grade. And so a real positive to what's being considered here is that 2-story addition for 6th grade would really maintain them separate from the rest of the building because that large blue box that you see just abutting that addition, if you're not familiar with the middle school, that is the school gym. And so the 7th and 8th grade are on that backwards L that you see on the left-hand side of the building. And so a real plus to what's being contemplated here is we still kind of nestle the 6th grade so that they have their own space. And this just shows you, what that addition would look like from a room standpoint.
The blue boxes in there are classroom boxes, and you'll see when we go to the 2nd floor, it's somewhat repetitive. So,
yeah. And again, that 2nd floor, that would be built to take care of future enrollment, right? So that really is the difference between the 2 middle school options. This is the fully loaded option that takes care of current sixth grade needs, but also helps us to plan for growing enrollment. And the next option that you'll see just takes care of current sixth grade needs.
So you see it shaped similarly, but it's just a 1-story now instead of a 2-story, which has enough room to take the current sixth grade, but does not, like you said, does not solve for the enrollment gain in it is about 8 to 9 years out, right? Where that enrollment would come through, but that's where Diane was saying it would certainly be less expensive to build that second story now than it will in the future. And so from a cost standpoint, it'd be less expensive. Also from a disruption to the school standpoint, and all, if you built the whole thing at once.
This just gives you, again, a look at what it looks like. The first floor looks, pretty much as a mirror image of what you saw in the fully loaded option. This just maintains it as a 1-story addition.
And that, yeah, can't go by that one.
Talk about site selection?
Yeah. All right, so there's been a separate subcommittee that's working on site selection. We really understand that that's a huge component to these decisions for us and for the community. That process is still, for the most part, confidential. It protects the town as they're trying to negotiate with a landowner. And the landowner also wants that to be private. So we hope to make some additional progress on that in the future. But we initially identified 22 sites that just for mostly around just the size of the property that it could handle it. And then slowly the subcommittee whittled that down for all kinds of different reasons. There's 4 sites remaining. 3 are privately owned and confidential. One of the sites is on the campus here in the back
Memorial Park.
Memorial Park, right? And so that we do want to point out that seems like for some things a big advantage in that there wouldn't be a cost for that property. But at the same time, the town would certainly want to relocate the recreational facility that already exists there. So there would still be a land purchase for that. So it's not a freebie. And I believe that site could not handle the consolidated
That's
school
correct.
option. There's not
So
enough space for it.
as it pertains to Memorial Park could only capture the neighborhood school. It could not, it would not be large enough for the consolidated school.
So the small bit of info that we have is that from the subcommittee is that in replacing 8 corners, we wanted to try to still serve that same geography as much as possible. And so the sites being considered are all within 2.5 to 3.5 miles from the 8 corners site.
Right, this next slide is on tax impact and operating costs. You've heard us talk a little bit about that this evening. First, at the top of the slide is the total project cost. Again, the nice thing about these handouts that have been prepared for you is they do lay out the different costs associated with each segment of the project. And so, we would really encourage you to look at those and attend to those. Right now, both of the projects are coming out at a similar rough order of magnitude costs. Please remember that rough order of magnitude is not specific, right? It just gives you an overall look. We are in the process of getting more detailed estimates. We actually expect to receive one detailed estimate next week, and for one of the projects, and the second estimate a couple of weeks later. So within the next 3 weeks or so, we will have a more specific estimate for each of the projects. And that will certainly inform the committee as it pertains to some of the scope changes or need to consider some scope reductions to make this project fall within a number that the committee feels comfortable with.
And that you'll see on, under the ROM costs, there's a range there, 122 to 132. That is dependent on which of the middle school options you apply to the total number.
Right. And so, again, in our literature, we have detailed out for you more thoroughly what the cost to the average Scarborough taxpayer would be of the current projects. Over the 32-year bonded process, it would equate to about $385 a year for the average home, which is being estimated at $600,000. That was something that the town tax department worked really closely with the building committee on. And so, again, there's a lot more information for all of you about that. On the lower part of the slide, again, there is estimates of the staffing costs for either the option of 3 neighborhood schools or the consolidated school. You can see the differences there. We also asked the town's tax department to help us understand how that would impact tax costs for the taxpayers, because staffing costs go into our annual school budget. And so that's not bonded as part of the project, right? Those are the costs that you see every year when we put our budget out. Our school budget is actually 81% staffing. And so that makes up a huge portion of our budget. And according to our tax department, for again, that average $600,000 valued home, the difference in that $2.6 million equates to about $190 to $200 on your annual tax bill. So what that means is if you chose the consolidated option, your taxes would actually go down by $200 a year versus if you maintain the neighborhood option. So, you know, again, we're here providing you with different pieces of information. And then you're going to help us to know, you know, what there is a community appetite for.
And one of the good things that are coming in this decision process is that the town is working, I think they've got a sample up on their site already of a modeling calculator that you'll be able to plug in your own personal assessed value, and it will tell you the tax impact to expect, obviously based on which of the options, you know, for the total cost.
Utilities operating costs.
This was something we asked Harriman to help us with because no matter how well we renovate those existing schools, they're still 60+ years old, and we are certainly considering it, updating the insulation and all kinds of different things for help with efficiency. But building a brand new building, you can make the whole thing tighter, more efficient. The HVAC systems are more efficient. So there is an advantage of about $60,000 a year of projected of savings for the consolidated school. Just there's no way around it. It's just a much, because you're building it all brand new. You're not
Retrofitting.
yeah, and even the windows have been replaced in those primary schools, but they're 20 years old.
Don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
We can find out.
So they're newer than the school, but not as good as what you could buy today. So those were considerations for both the staffing and this, and we should also be able to get some tighter numbers on that as we move forward as well.
Absolutely. So this very robust page kind of gives you an overview of some of the scope reductions or deferments that are being considered. Again, we're not going to go through this bullet by bullet with you, but there are different options that are being considered on the table. The first of which would be to defer the addition at Wentworth. And it is really important that everyone understands that it's not a yes or a no, that it would be a deferment because there will still be a need for more space. If we defer that from the project at this time, that would be about $3.3 million in savings. But again, you would have to expect that we would be coming back to you in about 3 years, asking for financial support to try to solve that. Second option would be to defer some of the classrooms at the middle school. So not to build that second story addition, to just build the 1-story addition. That would create a current savings of about $9.2 million. Again, we would have to be coming back to you probably in about 7 years so that that could be built in time. One of the things that we weren't really specific about when we showed you the addition at the middle school is that the cafeteria is planned to be right size, not just the addition, but also changing that cafeteria so that we can solve for that problem that we talked to you about. If we decided to defer the second story of the middle school and defer any changes to the cafeteria to accommodate lunches, that would be $20 million deferred. So that's another option. And then finally, the last deferment that has been discussed to date is to not do any work at the middle school, to leave it as is for the time being. And that would decrease the project currently by $41 million. So those are some of the deferments. Again, if you've seen the survey and you've taken it, hopefully you've seen that we've also provided a lot of educational material within the survey to help you feel informed about providing us with your feedback.
That's a great example, particularly those middle school ones around making a choice to do less to save money, and that what's the trade-off for that. And we are not dictating any of that yet. We're still working on that, waiting for more detailed estimates, but they're all difficult decisions. Save money, but any one of those deferments will cost more in the future. So they're tough decisions.
So we've done a lot of talking, and we're really interested in hearing from all of you tonight, either in the form of your own public comment or questions that you might have that we might be able to assist you with this evening. And so there are a couple of ways that we can do this because, again, we're trying to be thoughtful about everyone's comfort level. And so if you are comfortable coming up to the podium, or I think we may also have a wireless mic that we can come to you with, and we can hear from you in that format. If you are less comfortable as a public speaker, which I know some people certainly are, we have this other option. It's called Slido. If you use this QR code on your phone, you can actually type in your question. No one in this room will know that it was you typing it, but we will all see it, and then we will be able to assist you with an answer. And so again, we're trying to really be as fully engaging with all of you as we can be in the way that you feel most comfortable. So at this time, we would really open up for your questions, comments, and feedback.
We do ask if you're going to speak that you come either here or use the mic so it's picked up for the recorded meeting.
Right, yes. And if you are on Zoom, you can also still use this Slido option, or you could raise your hand. Thank you.
Hi. We have come one heck of a long way from the one-room schoolhouse.
We
That
certainly
is for
have.
sure. But as I look out here, I see people, but I know the town has something like 23,000, 25,000 people. And it's astounding to me that there aren't more people here. And I'm sad about that because you guys have worked so hard. And I give you great congratulations for an incredible job, and all the committees that have met week after week. And you've also done this last year too. So I just wanted to have kudos. Now, my questions. I have a neighbor who's wondering about the cost of furniture. Is that included in the cost of the school? And then also the other thing was, I wonder, are you concerned about the volatility of costs because of tariffs and because of the financial situation? Will this bottom line maybe change, do you think, over time because of materials and costs? Thank you, guys. This is really, really great. Thank you.
I think on the question for the cost of furniture, in all these estimates, there's very thorough thought into everything to build the building and then everything to furnish it. As Lisa from Harriman points out, she said this, what they refer to as soft costs is if you could pick the building up and shake it, it's everything that would fall out. So there's budget lines in there for furniture and gym equipment and everything you need to operate the school. On the tariffs and the political situation.
I'll let Lisa speak to that.
Okay.
So this is Lisa Sowen. She is our lead principal architect from Harriman.
Good evening. Great to see so many of you here and online. So as we can all understand, there's a lot of things happening in the climate right now with tariffs. We are looking at that closely with our estimators. And so they are putting together advisements on that. And as those come through, we will share those with the committee. But as everybody knows, that's a hard one to pin down right now. But we will talk about how we can do our best to plan for what is coming down the road. So to be continued. Thank you.
Thanks.
How you doing? Nick McGee. I want to thank the committee and all of the people that, have put tons and tons of hours. I don't think anyone here realizes how often they meet, how much time they spend on the phone, and how many emails they share. It's incredible. So to pull all this together, it's really quite the feat. You've come such a long way since we started phase one. So all the gratitude in the world. I just have some casual observations, and I was hoping that maybe this has been either discussed or could be discussed at some point, but just right off, just looking at your brochure and what you have here, it looks like Pleasant Hill almost doubles in size by square footage. And that's, I know it's just a graphic, but it looks like you're only going to accommodate about 43 more students by doubling that much square footage for an addition. And then Blue Point looks like it's going to accommodate only about 16 more students at the end of it. And I'm talking if you went with the 3-school option. And I guess my question would be, had any analysis been done on whether or not those students, 59 students, could have been absorbed into the proposed new K-2 school at a cost savings? And I also understand that there are definitely space needs at those schools, and so you still need to get bigger and still accommodate what you have. But I'm just wondering if the opportunity to maybe even say, hey, we're not going to accommodate more than 200, per class at each of those schools, and then have all those excess over to the new building, that would be a cheaper build than trying to cram more addition space onto those small properties and take away those playground spaces and things like that. So I wanted to know if you hadn't done any analysis, if there's any intent to do so. And I would say, I did note that you have here in the footnote that more detailed cost estimates are coming in May. So I think that would also help my question as to whether what's the difference between the renovation costs and the addition costs, because I think we can all acknowledge those schools need upgrades. But what is that cost of the upgrade versus what are we investing in for additions? And if that addition money could actually have been spent on a new construction or you get more bang for your buck, I was just wondering if that was one of the areas you could look at. that was about it right now, but excellent job, and again, I appreciate what everyone's done here.
Yeah, to try to answer some of your question, Nick, I think as you take a look at the layouts of the proposals for the renovations and additions at both Pleasant Hill and Blue Point, what you'll see is there is a lot of square footage that gets addressed because of the trying to solve the cafeteria and gymnasium problem. And so that's a big piece of it. And the other thing that you'll see is that we've tried to right-size those kindergarten classrooms as I spoke to earlier in the presentation. And there are not enough special education spaces in those current sites. So I understand and I hear what your concern is. I think that certainly we could have taken a different look at the size of that third school, but we were trying to stay true to the neighborhood school concept, and not have one school be so large that it lost that feel, because that was a piece that we did hear from the community. But really great feedback. And again, this is where we are in the project, and we're going to continue to make changes and amendments as we see our costs come in.
And I think you have a comrade on Slido that was virtually asked the same question. So that applies there as well. I can also push Diane to explain the state and federal funding. For
Sure,
this
yeah.
district, the district in general.
Yeah, if we want to go to that question on Slido to kind of just go back and
Yeah.
forth between the different modalities that we're using this evening. So in terms of funding available for any of these options, we actually did submit 4 applications for state funding last summer to the state. And the state came in the month of March to do all of our site visits. And so our facilities director, Todd Jepson, and I took the state group to each of our 4 schools, the 3 primary schools and the middle school, because those were the schools that we had done applications for. State funding opens up every several years. We had also applied for funding back in 2017 when the last round of funding had opened up at the state, and we did not find ourselves at the top of that list or successful. I think that at that time in 2017, there were about 77 projects that were submitted. 77 schools had applied. And I think that our highest ranking school was number 28 on the list. And the state only has enough funding to do about 5 projects every cycle. And so we were not successful that time. We have not yet received information about this last round that we applied for. The way the state works is they collect applications. And so this round, there are over 100 schools that have applied, because not unlike Scarborough, there's so many schools in Maine that were built in that same 1960 era, right? There was some funding that was available, some things that were happening through the Sinclair Act that provided for a lot of building during that era. And so there are many communities finding themselves in the same position as Scarborough. And so the state is taking this entire school year to go around and have the same one team visit and rank all of the schools. And they will be putting that together. And we are expecting to hear from them, I believe, early fall. So it is a full year process. And so again, we've done our due diligence and we've done that. Although I will say, from a realistic point of view, it is probably unlikely that our positioning will change, because you probably have similar schools that were in that first round of 77 and now some additional. And so, when only 5 schools come off the list, and I think that there are a few other schools that came off the list because other local entities found their own solutions. But certainly, things in the landscape have not changed as significantly. So the unfortunate reality is that it is highly unlikely. It would be wonderful. I'd be super excited because we've invested a lot of money, a lot of time, excuse me, into those applications and all of the time that we've spent with the state on that. But we're also trying to be realistic about that and not wanting to sit and not work on solving this problem that we know needs to be addressed.
Hi, Cressy Maurer. I just first want to say what an excellent job you've done. Whoops. And I'm just very impressed with all the options and both from the, capital cost of building, of actually building these schools and different options and how you could, defer some costs as well as the annual budget. I did have a question about the annual budget, operating costs. What are our current operating costs with the option to retain the 3 local primary schools? How much does the annual operating cost jump from the current one?
So that's something that I'd have to get back to you on, because as we considered this, what we did was we contemplated a fully loaded, right? Like once those schools are at full capacity, right? So we're expecting, to have 840 some odd students. And so we built the operating costs at that number.
Okay, I got it. Okay.
Right? Because we're going to have to educate those students regardless of what type of building we have.
Okay, okay. Another question I had is in deferring some of these things, is there any effort to project what the cost of deferring some of things like the second story addition or the addition of the classes to Wentworth, which will have to happen, but there's a future economic cost to that. So that would be helpful so that you understand that by deferring it, there is a cost to that deferment. And I don't know if there's any effort to try to put some, rough magnitude numbers around that.
We haven't done that so much, but it would to some
We can
degree
get to
be an
that.
inflation exercise kind of, for trying to
Yep.
predict, building costs and things.
And then just a final comment, in knocking on a lot of doors last year, campaign for town council, I really did hear a lot of feedback from the public wanting to retain their local primary schools. And, what I find excellent, what you've done is there is, trade-offs to that because it's a higher annual operating budget
Right.
to do that. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Good evening. I'm Carol Gautreaux. I live on Jamico Mill Road in Scarborough. And I was part of the advisory group 1. And our team came up with Plan A. And it, as it turned out, got the most votes for advisory groups 1. Since then, advisory group 2 modified A to, I don't know if you call it a hybrid of A, the original A and not, but so I am a proponent of maintaining the neighborhood schools. And I'll give you a brief history on Plan A. Plan A started out maintaining the neighborhood schools. And this is the original that we didn't vote on. Maintaining the neighborhood schools, moving grade 2 over to Wentworth, grade 5 over to the middle school. And with that, we were going to do additions on Wentworth and the middle school. Taking one of the grades out, grade 2 out of the neighborhood schools immediately frees up 30% space and capacity. So we thought that was a neat idea. When we started, however, our team, our advisory group team one, we kind of thought it through, and we said, well, rather than moving grade two, maybe we should just try to keep the neighborhood schools intact, modify them, bring them up to speed. And that would be a challenge. There's no question about it. Eight Corners is really needs help. So in thinking of what all the input has been, if we took, I'll go back to taking grade two out of the neighborhood schools, it frees up 30% capacity in each of those schools, those three schools immediately. Where would we go with grade two? Okay, so I'm coming back now to, we'd want to look at moving grade two to Wentworth, grade five from Wentworth in middle school. Or tonight, in looking at the slides and the potential increased capacity at Blue Point, is there space at Blue Point to put an addition or a building over there to accommodate grade two, still freeing up that 30% space in each of the neighborhood schools? So there are opportunities to retain the neighborhood schools and move grade two. Now, grade two or K2 in a new building means another site and so forth. I'd like to suggest that we utilize any assets that we have, any properties that we own, if we build another school. But I would encourage us to look for a budget of not to exceed $100 million. Because if we if we come up with a potential budget of 133, that can grow to 160 and so forth. I think we need to get, work with the contractor coming out of the gate and make our point that we do not want to spend any more than $100 million. And whether we do it by building a school for K2 or moving just grade two out of the neighborhood schools to free up capacity there. The budget should have a number that is to be a not to exceed. Because if we don't do that, it's going to grow and grow and grow. And I think there probably isn't a contractor around that if they know what the budget is, they will work with you to try to achieve that goal. Otherwise, it's a loose end. The other point I'd like to make is that if we do build a school for K2, I think we should see, and I'll use a figure of 130 million or 33 as an example. If we do build a new school, the dollars that are saved from each of the neighborhood school should be clearly identified and shown as to how they reduce the cost, the proposed cost by the contractor, i.e., if it is $133 million, I think we should be looking at the real numbers that come out of setting aside the neighborhood schools and how many dollars would that reduce that 133 million down to. Okay, so for us to make a decision in November, if that is when it happens, I think we all should be looking at as close as possible to real numbers. We've identified savings, administrative savings from each school, etc. I think we should identify the real savings of taking 3 schools offline, and if we're going to build a school, show exactly as close as possible, show how much taking those three schools offline will reduce that 133. I know if it were me to make if I had to make the decision, I would be looking at, okay, 133. Now I want to see what the real cost is going to be after I take out the operating costs of the three neighborhood schools. It's the only way to justify a program like this. We have to show bottom line cost. And I know as a voter, when I go in the booth in November, if I cannot see how the reduction or the proposed savings has taken 133 down to something else, I can't vote for it. So that's normal business. Contractors are used to seeing that. And if we don't make our intentions known to the contractor, potentially we could lose another vote this November. So everybody has spent a lot of time with this. Group one, every week we spent until April last year. Group two, same deal. Quality people, by the way, in each of those groups, 50 to 70 people every single week. Now, I think there's been enough input to come up with a solution with what I'll call a reasonable cost. And I would like to see the reasonable cost be not to exceed $100 million. And I would like to see any savings that are suggested put on paper, so they're not suggested anymore, and they're reduced from the cost of the project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Matt Garrett. I live off of Black Point Road. First of all, the committee and Diane and Harriman have done such a great job putting these things together and coming up with answers and running numbers and different solutions, different scenarios, and it's been kind of overwhelming to watch. It makes me uncomfortable. But point of clarification for the tax impact. It's average of $385 per year over 30 years for a new 8 corners and maintain Pleasant Hill and Wentworth Middle.
Either of the
Blue Point.
options.
Right.
Yeah.
However, with a consolidated school reduction of 2.6 million is $190 to $200 per year per household is $600,000. Can I simply put, if it's a consolidated school option, take 385 and subtract $200 for it, my tax impact would be $185.
That's correct.
And same thing with yeah, I guess that's the question. So it's just kind of, all right, well, your taxes go down by $200. Well, no, because we still have the cost of the building. So essentially it's a consolidated school would go, instead of $385 per year per $600,000 household, would be $185 a year, which is under the $200 threshold that you guys were working with to begin with. Is that correct?
That's right.
$400?
Yes.
Just as long as it's kind of two different buckets of money, you know, you'd have the bond cost would come in at one, and then the savings, in the example you're giving, the savings on that would be out of the annual school budget.
For sure.
The net
But everybody
result.
gets one tax bill.
Right.
It's not an itemized tax bill.
Right.
They look at it and it says $3,000 a year or whatever it is, and then it goes to 3,400. Or it goes to 3,200.
Correct.
So that's just wanted to clear it up. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, I just want to be a cheerleader for the consolidated schools. I know lots of people have different opinions, and that's great, but I just feel like that makes the most sense, and I really hope people will vote for the consolidated school. And it'll be exciting to find out where it'll be. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Meredith Jackson. I live in the Pleasant Hill area. I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, so I feel like this is
extremely important conversation for me. I'm also a pediatrician, so I care a lot about kids and their education and special education. And I know Doris, I used to work with her at the Barbara Bush Children's Hospital, the nurse at Pleasant Hill. So I have no idea how she's managing, but I know she's amazing. So I know she can do it too. I also want to express my support for the consolidated option. I think it makes the most sense. I think it gives us the best energy efficiency. I took the online survey, and I saw one of the other cost cutting measures was potentially not doing air conditioning, which I think is not an option, especially with climate change. I just had to have heat pumps installed at my house because otherwise running 7-window air conditioners was getting absurd during some weeks in the summer. You know, we moved to Scarborough from South Portland in 2020, and had a baby in 2020 and 2023. So I guess we're part of that big baby boom that happened. You know, the pandemic did a lot for a lot of people and a lot of different things. Main med is where I work, and we're having same problems with capacity issues for a hospital that was just renovated recently, and we are constantly overflowing on newborn because so many babies are being born. I'm always being told to discharge people faster. We have to do something. And so I will truly support whatever the town supports because we have to do something. So my preference would be for the consolidated school, but I'll vote yes on whatever comes up. That'd be great. So Ray's going to help us with the Slido. He'll read some of those into the record. We'll do our best to answer.
So the first question that came in is, I heard you say the bond would last for 32 years. I recognize it's impossible to predict how that far in the future, but do you think that this would last that long? I assume we're starting the construction.
Oh, I see. So you're asking if the life of the school will still be viable while we're still paying for it.
Right.
I speaking God for myself, I can't say for sure, but since we got 60+ years out of the first version, I'd like to think that it would be along those lines.
So I will address that question. Typical buildings per the National Center for Educational Statistics, a new build will last approximately 60 years before it's replaced on average. Some last way longer. Different components of the building get replaced at different intervals. So just like your house, your roof only lasts, so many years. Some of the mechanical systems may not see that full, 30+ years, depending on what they are. And some other things will be replaced, but overall, the project is intended to last well beyond that time period.
Yeah. So the way enrollment projections work, again, we had our last enrollment projection study done just in 2023, actually. So it's pretty recent. And Scarborough has had, a number of enrollment projections in the last 10 years. Enrollment projections only go 10 years out. So statistically, you lose the value after that period of time, which is why I think that you can see in a couple of the plans, we've identified places where we might still be able to have some future expansion because we can't project out further than that.
The next question was the useful lifespan of the primary school renovations versus the new construction.
Again, it varies. New construction, useful life is on average, overall building itself is about, they're usually retired after 60 years, usually see a major renovation in a building after the 40-year mark. And so we typically see those major renovations happening at that time, lasting about that long. Different systems, again, will be less than that. So again, some of the mechanical systems have less of a useful life, somewhere between the 20 to 40-year mark.
do you know what the number one complaint was for voting the first referendum? Was it just cost?
So we actually did a survey last year to help us get more information about the reasons that the referendum failed. And there were multiple reasons that different people cited. One was cost. Another was location. People were not pleased with the location that was selected. Another factor was the size of the building, because again, it was contemplated for about 1,150 students. So I think depending on who you were as a resident and how you voted, there were different factors that weighed into that.
Are any of the options including pre-K within the new development?
So the project currently does not include pre-K. The town council and the school board gave a very specific charge to this building committee to come up with a K-8 school solution. The school board at the same time is very interested in pursuing more public pre-K. We actually opened our first public pre-K classroom this year. It is a partner classroom, so it's not in any of our schools because we don't have space. But that partner classroom is held at the Shooting Stars program down by Lois's Natural Foods. We were able to start that classroom because I was successful in writing a grant from the state. And so that pre-K was paid for in total by the state this year and will be again next year. Those are startup funds that the state had a grant that provided the opportunity to give districts some startup costs to kind of launch into pre-K. The school board recently held a workshop and is very interested in pre-K. There are a lot of costs associated with pre-K because the requirements are very different. For example, a pre-K classroom must have 2 staff members. You must have a teacher, you must have an ed tech. So staffing alone is a major cost. We also need to have space. We currently don't have space. And we also heard really clearly from the community that they wanted us to contain costs for this project. And so it is hard to do everything when you have a really strict budget that voters are saying that they are willing to support. I think the school board is really hopeful that as we move forward, we can continue to consider what pre-K options might exist in the future. I think depending on how this project goes and if we have schools or a school that goes offline, if there's an opportunity to repurpose for pre-K, again, it's not ours to decide because the town owns the buildings. But that is certainly something that I think that there would be great interest in contemplating for the future.
When would each of the 2 plans be operational for students?
Yeah, so it's projected that they will be operational near the 28-29 school year.
Which would be just in time for our growing enrollment of students to begin.
And I think we've answered this, but
Mhm.
in order to preserve the outdoor space at Pleasant Hill, could the extra population go to the bigger building? I think we've addressed that. Would be very annoyed as someone who lives in Pleasant Hill if somehow my kids had to go to a different neighborhood school. Also, how would you bus kids in an effective way from Pleasant Hill and Blue Point areas?
I think the second part of that question is about, I'm assuming is if there was a consolidated school.
That's right.
Okay.
Oh,
Could you just make the third new school bigger and not put more into the public school? Like if my kids, I lived in Pleasant Hill, and my kids are like, well, sorry, you didn't make the cut for the Pleasant Hill school. You have to go to this other K through 2 school all the way across town. Right, and again, redistricting or drawing district lines around where neighborhood schools are is something that districts have to contemplate and change from time to time, depending on where enrollment increases are happening. And so, you know, that is not something that the district is in a position to guarantee, that if you live on X, Y, and Z streets, you will always go to a school, you know, school A. That is just, you know, something that is beyond our capability to control.
The next is a very positive comment about the thoughtfulness and thoroughness of the committee's work on this and everyone's work on this. And then up to the question above that is, when do you project K2 Unified School would have the 842 students?
So again, we are expecting to see that enrollment increase beginning in 2028. And so I would say that when we would expect to see it fully loaded, probably within,
It's within a couple of years of that, I believe, is what the projections show. We can get back to you on that. We have all that data.
In the consolidated versions, would class sizes be larger?
no, we would be, again, at our primary schools, our current range for class size, as defined by the school board is 16 to 20 students for K to 2. When the space allocation was done, for the consolidated project, I think that, fully loaded, we based that on 20 being the top.
And the second part of that question is just thanking you and the committee for their work in making clear the needs at Wentworth in the middle school. And then going up to the next question, does the town have the capital reserve fund to help offset the total amount bonded for the overall project?
I'm not in a position to speak about that.
No, other than, I don't know that either, other than it's as part of the work. There's been some areas identified in these renovations, kind of broken between major renovation and minor renovation, and those have potential to be kind of budgeted differently.
The next question is a financial question. If a $132 million building budget will add 500 and then 385 to the average property owner's tax bill, then a 2.6 million staff savings for the consolidated school approach can't save 190 to 200 off the tax bill. What am I missing? I think the comment above it may be answering that question. That 2.6 is an every year
Correct.
figure.
And again, that is $2.6 million at current staffing costs, right? And so just like inflation, that would not be $2.6 million every year into perpetuity. It would, I'll give you a great example, because we did these staffing costs for the failed referendum. In 2023, when we looked at staffing costs, the difference between neighborhood schools and a consolidated project was $2.4 million. That is now $2.6 million, and the staffing is very consistent. And so again, wages and benefits increase year over year, just like everything else. And so, you know, that 2.6 is not a fixed number. That's 2.6 in 2025 wages and benefits.
And the next is, what about the staff that would lose their jobs for savings?
So again, you know, I don't think that we have specifically planned for that, but one of the pieces that I think people need to recognize is that we do have some attrition on a year over year basis. We have a very diverse staff population, and so you know, we have some younger teachers, we have some mid-career teachers, we have some veteran staff. And so, you know, I don't think it would be the goal to lay off people or RIF people. And again, we are not seeing, like, we're seeing this shift happening over time, right? It's not like we're going to go from 600 students to 850 students in 1 year's time. And so we feel confident that much of this might be addressed just through some natural attrition.
And the other way it'll be addressed is our current population's here, and in 5 years, our population's here. It's gonna mean we're gonna have to
Bringing more
add
people.
less teachers over the next 5 years as we see that increase. So that's where that savings we found in hiring less new teachers
That's a
as
great
well.
point.
Oh. Uh-oh,
Go back to presentation.
I guess we're done. There you go, yeah.
And we do see some people on Zoom with their hands raised, and we will get to you. I think we're trying to kind of piecemeal through here. So we did the live comments, we're doing the slide out comments, and we will absolutely get to folks online. So please don't think that we're not noticing those folks.
All right. I'm gonna go from the top down now until we hit the others. I just want to thank you, everyone, for all the thought they have put into these options. It's a challenge to meet the needs while staying in the budget outline. I lean towards preserving the neighborhood schools, but we'll vote yes for whichever option the committee decides to, does the best to balance the needs and desires of Scarborough residents. The next one, with the consolidated school option, would there be an increase in cost for busing students to the consolidated school? If so, has this been including it in the operating projections?
So we haven't done a specific transportation study because we have not finalized the site. That being said, the sites that are under consideration are somewhat central to the community. And so once we have more specific site information, we will be working through that transportation question.
I echo all the others who stated that you have done an exceptional job in this work. The two options are viable. You really need to put the option forward that will pass. With that said, you didn't accurately convey the sentiments of feedback from the community from the first vote. Please be transparent. Next, quick question regarding the portable classrooms. How long have the portable classrooms been there and how many are there?
So we have a total of 30 portable classrooms in the district. They are of different ages and vintage. The oldest of which are probably at the middle school. The middle school portables have been on site since, I believe, 1998. That's 27 years. So I only know that because that's the year my son was born.
Mhm.
So those are somewhat dated. We have 10 portables at Eight Corners School. So there are half of that school is made up of portable classrooms. And then we have 6 portables at Blue Point and 4 portables at Pleasant Hill. We did add, the most recent portables have been added at Pleasant Hill and Eight Corners. We've added some since 2020.
My home borders the entire parking area and proposed cafeteria addition at Blue Point. First, the proposed parent drop-off would require every car to turn into our small street, Eagles Nest Drive. That doesn't bother me. However, the visibility and entryway into our street is not great. Will this be addressed? Second, what will happen to the Blue Point property if the consolidated option is chosen?
I can just, we don't know what will happen to the Blue Point property necessarily. It isn't part of our decisions or recommendations at all. Just like the Eight Corners site, the town in the future would be making those decisions.
And just to speak to any specifics around visibility, we will look at that in more detail as we advance the design at that location.
Okay, I have been predisposed to retain the neighborhood schools. However, this presentation has highlighted that more responsible short and long-term solution would be the consolidated school. The initial cost of the two projects are fairly comparable, but there are two compelling reasons why the consolidated solution is better. First is the very notably lower operational costs of the consolidated school. And second is the fact that the newer facility would have the infrastructure that would require less maintenance and upgrade in the near future. While retaining the local schools, we would face with upgrading infrastructure in the not too distant future.
Mhm.
And that's our last.
Great. So
we
do you
have
want to
that
look
line,
online
yeah.
now? Can you
Yeah,
go
I
onto
got it.
Zoom? Yep. We've got Ray on roller skates this evening.
We do want to say if there are additional comments, you can continue to add them here, or there are the comment cards up front as well.
Absolutely. Looks like you only have one hand.
Megan, I'm going to allow you to talk.
All right, good evening, everybody. I also just want to echo what others have said. It's obvious that the committee and everyone involved has put a lot of thought and time into this plan. I'm here really just to learn. I was part of the phase 1 committee, so I want to get caught up on what everyone has been up to and just learn about the details of these final 2 potential options. I heard some feedback tonight. Those who have sat through this presentation seem to prefer the consolidated option. My fear is that the consolidated option, although it's different from the last one, is too similar. I have an almost 3-year-old, so this school project is front of mind for me and for a safe school for our son to go to. I would urge the committee to consider the option that will pass with all voters, not just the people who are in the room tonight and sitting through this presentation. Not everyone has the time, ability to do that. So I think if the town brings the consolidated option back to referendum, it's 30 million less, it's 1 grade less, it's going to be hopefully a different site, but it's essentially a watered down version of what went to referendum last time. And it failed, I don't know the exact numbers, I think it was basically 2/3 who voted against. And I talked to a lot of neighborhood neighbors and people last time, and the consensus is that in general, Scarborough will put things to a referendum until the town gets what it wants. And my fear is that that's what this looks like. So I would just urge the committee, please consider the 3 primary school options to go to referendum. Thank you.
Marvin.
Hi, thank you. Marvin Gates, 423 Black Point Road. I have been a regular attendee to these meetings, SBAC 1 and SBAC 2, and to the meetings before the last referendum. And I have a comment, I suppose it is, or a suggestion regarding the discussion about relative benefits to consolidation versus neighborhood schools. That I don't think I've heard over the course of the last few years, and I completely understand these are building committees and buildings cost money, and that the restraints of what's necessary and what it costs are the primary focus. And I mean, I think that's simple what I just said. I get that the conversation is about money and the relative cost benefit analyses of the 2 options. I am a 70-year-old man. I was educated quite some time ago, but I remember very vividly doing my pre-K through 12th grade education in a small school. And I remember going off to university, and it was a large university. And even though the university divided itself within smaller colleges and departments, of course, I was overwhelmed by the difference in the approach to education of a small school versus a large school. And I have been around this conversation long enough to know that the consolidated design brings satellites to the design so that the youngsters might not be overwhelmed by the size of the place. I remember being a youngster, and I remember those kinds of things helped, but you could sort of see through them too. So that's all the background. What I'd like to see going forward, and before this goes to referendum, at least in some small part, is for the committee and the educators to describe the difference between the two options in terms of education benefits. There must be a benefit to a smaller school. There must be a benefit to a larger school. And there must be their opposites to both. And unless that conversation takes place, I don't think we've done our children the best service. When I read the survey that we met to discuss at Wentworth, oh, I don't know, it's been some time ago, I remember being struck, and I'm almost done, by the fact that there seemed to be broad agreement that people would be interested in neighborhood schools, even if they cost more. And I take it in the abstract that that has something to do with the abstract of what an educational benefit is versus a cost benefit. So hopefully that's clear, and I appreciate all the work that's been done. It's beyond belief. But before it's done, I'd love to hear the educators describe the differences. They're not the same. They can't be the same. So hopefully that makes sense, and thank you for the chance to comment.
Hi, Tim Lambert. So with option A, if option A were to pass at the referendum as planned, we're talking 5 simultaneous projects. We got Wentworth Middle School, 8 Corners, Blue Point, Pleasant Hill. Is there any concern that we might run out of people, tradespeople to build 5, do 5 major renovations or build 1 massive school at the same time? Because I mean, I don't know if anybody's tried to get like just, someone to come over to their house to do drywall, but it just seems like that's a lot of stuff, going on. And I like that on the survey, you've gauged people's desire to, defer. Should we defer Wentworth? Should we defer this and that at the middle school? I would say that if you look at the 5 schools, and I'm going to vote for option A no matter what. And I echo what Megan was just saying about, one of the major reasons. There were 3 major reasons why the referendum failed. One was the cost, the other was the location, the other was because we didn't want to lose our neighborhood school. And you had 3 factions of people who you got to satisfy. So by deferring certain constructions, obviously you bring down the price from 132 million to below that. But you have 5 problems that you're trying to solve. And, looking at them, I would say the priority is 8 Corners. And then this, this is, me just looking at from my observation, priority would be 8 Corners 1, middle school 2, Pleasant Hill 3, Blue Point 4, Wentworth 5. There wasn't any question on the survey about potentially deferring a Blue Point renovation or deferring a Pleasant Hill renovation. But looking at the costs that you provided tonight, you could potentially, if you did defer those renovations to focus on the biggest problem, which is, 8 corners, judging by all the modulars and the current enrollment, you could potentially shave off bring it down from 132 million down to 88 million, somewhere in the 80 to 88 million dollar range, which gets below the $100 million that Mr. Gautreaux was saying is, like a magic number, right? So you've got a faction of town that's going to vote no matter what. You've got some people who are going to say, well, I'll vote yes if it's below a certain number. And then you've got, a lot of us who are just going to vote for it because we want something to happen. We know there's a priority, but that's obviously what you're trying to do with surveys, try to find that balance. So that's something else to think about, is deferring those other things and just prioritizing the priorities, as we've heard said so many times here. Thank you.
Thank you. We are right on time.
You have 5 responses.
All right.
Oh, boy.
I think we're gonna, we'll do these 5 new Slido responses, and then I think we will close it out because we are coming to that 8 o'clock hour.
Under the consolidated school option, how long would our youngest students be on the bus from the furthest neighborhoods?
Again, as I said earlier, because we haven't finalized a site, we don't have that specific information. We certainly would have that specific information once that site is finalized.
What if the voters don't like the land you have selected for either of the new schools? Will we have a chance to give feedback before they finalize any deals?
So land is a confidential negotiation process. So we're not in a position to be able to go out to voters and say, we're thinking about entering into a land deal with John Doe. What are people's feedback on that?
I can understand the cost being a driving factor. However, as a teacher in our district, I am inclined to put the needs of our youngest students above potential cost savings. In my opinion, we must retain small neighborhood schools. Neighborhood schools is something that attracted me to Scarborough as an educator versus schools like Falmouth and Cumberland. We have a dozen kindergarten classrooms, another dozen first grade classrooms, et cetera. Building relationships with students is so critical to success that we've had a hard that's very hard to do when there's 200 plus students in each grade level alone. Comment? I think the idea of the neighborhood school is dated for Scarborough. We are building dense residential zones within the Downs, and my perception of as a Scarborough resident over a decade, the trend is no longer single family homes with a neighborhood feel. I think maybe one of the misconceptions about the consolidated school is that it would feel overwhelming for students. I think the reality is the current design can make a large space feel small. I wanted to underscore some of the current ideas of needs for kids. Physical movement within the day, both in the classroom and outdoors. The cost savings and the new concepts in the building, I think, outweigh renovating. The next is, I believe our district-wide enrollment has been in a long-term decline despite the population growing significantly. Increase in births between 2020 and 2022 mirrors the COVID boom phenomenon seen nationwide, with a return to falling birth rates long-term trend and expectation that the COVID boom will be a temporary peak. Is there a way to decrease the cost and size of the middle school expansion and just augment this peak with temporary portables? If a long-term enrollment does increase in the future, then the further middle school expansion could be considered then. A total budget of under 100 would be far more likely to pass a referendum. I feel especially that an option over 100 million in consolidated schools does not have a chance of passing. Not sure how you lose 20 positions with the same number of kids. I just want to say thank you to you and everyone. Oh, I think we've already done that one. All right.
All right, thank you so much, everybody, for coming and learning all this. I know it's very deep. There are posters up if you want to spend some minutes looking at larger versions of the sites. And then the last thing is you all have to promise to get 5 people to take the survey.
And again, we have paper copies of the survey, so if you know other community members who you think, that would work much better for than taking the survey online, please feel free to take some of those this evening and hand those out to others that you think could benefit. Thank you so much for your time and attention. We really
Thank you.
appreciate it.